Even if you're a fan of another university except that wreck in Ann Arbor, welcome to another episode of Unsportsmanlike Conduct. I am the host with the most, Matt Keller. I told you last week that our good friend of the show, Herb Haygood, would come on today, join me in the studio. Obviously, some family issues sprung up, so he wasn't able to come here to the studio to do the show with me, but we did it by satellite. You know, the amount of our expense account knows no limit here at Unsportsmanlike Conduct. So we were able to sell the film crew to Ipsy, and I have Herb Haygood standing by as soon as I finish up my rant. But we got to get right into that. So let's do that right now. NFL news right now. I was looking today at the Cleveland Browns. Now, a lot of people are going to try to link the Cleveland Browns to the Detroit Lions because both of them are really dysfunctional organizations. Never either. They're the only two teams that haven't played in the Super Bowl. They're the only two teams that have not that went 0-16 in the season, so they have that in common. It's kind of a fraternity, a brotherhood, if you will. Detroit Lions fans, congratulations on that, and to the Cleveland Browns fans as well. But Cleveland has the number one overall pick in the draft this year, and I noticed that Kiper and Mel Kiper and Todd McShay both have Saquon Barkley high, the running back from Penn State, high on their board. Some have him at number one, and the Cleveland Browns really need a running game. But Crowell was down there, and he really didn't do much. And I really think Isaiah Crowell is a good running back. Actually, I think the Detroit Lions would be better off if they went after him in free agency. But of course, you can forget that, Lions fans, because nobody's coming to Detroit. I mean, the guy that was selling barbecue out on the corner of Cedar and Mount Hope, you might be able to get him. But other than that, an NFL player, not even visiting Detroit. So you can forget that. But the Cleveland Browns redid their offensive line. They have the stalwarts there, Joe Thomas, Sean Coleman, and Cameron Urban. And they spent $50 million. That they have the highest payroll for an offensive line in all of football. So it makes sense that they bring in Saquon Barkley for their running back. But you have Myles Garrett down there, which was a good, I think that really the steal of the draft last year. He's a really high energy, high motor type guy. And I think that Cleveland is building in the right direction. If you're at the absolute bottom of the barrel, it's going to take a long time. A lot of people are like, man, we should be competing this year. You're not going to be competing this year. You're not going to be competing next year. But that the pieces that they're putting into place right now are solid pieces. Todd Haley, the offensive coordinator down there, I think there'll be good things, doing good things. But currently, you have Deshaun Kaiser on the roster. He's a serviceable quarterback. I don't know if you go out and get use the number one overall pick on Sam Darnold, the University of Southern California quarterback. I don't know if I wouldn't want to have the job of making that decision because, first of all, I think Josh Rosen is a better quarterback. If any of you watched UCLA this season, I think that Josh Rosen played better than Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's not, to me, is not a great quarterback. So, I wouldn't want to be in this position of making the decision on whether we do that or not. If you want a safe pick, then Saquon Barkley with that offensive line they got there is a safe pick. If you're trying to make a splash and sell tickets, which I think the Cleveland Browns are trying to do, I think that you got to go with Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen, either one. I don't think you go wrong with Sam Darnold. It seems to be the most popular choice, but if it was me, Josh Rosen for your money is an all-around better quarterback than Sam Darnold. So we have to sit back and see what the Cleveland Browns do, and you might be able to build through free agency. I don't know if living in Cleveland is where people want to be when you could be in Los Angeles or New York or Philadelphia, Chicago, big cities like that. And Cleveland's just not a sexy city, so you're having a hard time attracting people down there. But like they always say, with the boom of the social media, you could be in small markets like Oklahoma and Memphis and do just fine. So we just have to sit back and see. Cleveland's got some tough decisions ahead of time. So ahead of them. So they're going to have to see what is going on there. Now in NBA news, the owner of the the Los Angeles Clippers said about the Blake Griffin trade that the reason the decision was made was because of chemistry issues. Now, I don't know what that means. Obviously, I don't know if that means that Blake Griffin isn't a good teammate, or I would have to talk to Mr. Ballmer and find out what that means. But for you to come out and publicly say that there was chemistry issues, and I don't know if that was with Chris Paul and Blake Griffin or what the issue was. I know that there's an inner team struggle with Doc Rivers and his son Austin, and I think that a lot of people believe that Austin Rivers gets a better shake than he should because his dad is the president and coach of the team. So I don't know if that factors in, and I wouldn't like to be someplace where I couldn't voice my opinion, especially making as much money as I'm a franchise player, and I should be able to say what I want to say. So I think that Blake Griffin maybe ran into something like that. And he had the off the court issues when he assaulted a member of the training staff or whatever it was last year and broke his hand and was out for an extended period of time. So there was some issues there, but with the LA Clippers, they're much like the Cleveland Browns, and that's extremely, you can't put much stock in them. They're dysfunctional. Detroit Lions, you can throw them in there too. They're all dysfunctional. But I wanted to really go on their starting five for the LA Clippers, because the owner, again, Steve Ballmer, said that it was chemistry issues and they got better when they traded for Blake Griffin. So the starting five in Los Angeles right now currently is Tobias Harris, which Detroit fans, Tobias Harris is a good player, and he's a slasher, and he's the type of player that all teams need. You need them on a roster. He's a grinder and a slasher, and he does dirty work. He's just a good player. So they got better as far as Tobias Harris goes, and then DeAndre Jordan, Danilo Gallinari. I'm like, come on, whatever. So Danilo Gallinari, Austin Rivers, as I said earlier, is on there, and I don't mean to take away from Austin Rivers. He's a good player. He's a really good player, and I just don't know if he's NBA starting caliber type of player. If you have to ask yourself, if my dad, if Doc Rivers wasn't the coach, would Austin Rivers be starting anywhere in the NBA? Because I don't think he would. Maybe for the Pistons, but other than that, I don't think that. And then Milos Teodosic he is what he is, just mediocre players. That starting five doesn't really strike fear in a lot of people's minds. I don't think it's some middle or just slightly below middle average type of NBA team. They do have a good bench. The Clippers have a really good bench. They have Lou Williams is on their bench, Avery Bradley, Pat Beverly, Montrezl Harrell. If you remember, I'm big on Montrezl Harrell out of Louisville. He's a Dennis Rodman type of. I don't need the ball to be successful. I'll go get mine off the glass, So I always respected those type of players. Montrezl Harrell is that type of player. So their bench is really good, and I don't think that the Los Angeles Clippers got any better. They dumped a big salary, $30 plus million a year. So maybe because of cap reasons that later on down the line that this will have some kind of impact on their organization. But right now, Clippers fans, don't hold your breath, because nothing's happening with them this year. In a 7-game series with Golden State, they might get maybe one game. I don't even think they would. I think they get swept, but they might get one. So reasonably, if you're a fan of the Clippers and the NBA, you know that they're not a factor in this at all. And I just thought that was ironic that the owner, who you hardly ever hear come out and speak about players individually, came out and said that the trade was specifically because of chemistry issues. So that's something to keep an eye on. Speaking of the Detroit Pistons, they are 25-24. Well, let me say this: the Detroit Pistons are right now a game and a half out of the playoffs. So I think the Miami Heat sit right ahead of them. The Pistons are 28-30, 6-4 since the trade. I mean, I know a lot of people. Austin from Washington called in a couple weeks ago and was like, "Yeah, since the Blake Griffin trade, they're 5-0, and they were 5-0." And I think people were just excited about it, but the stink is worn off, as the bloom is off the tree, or whatever the saying is. That now the Pistons are who they are, and they're 28-30. They're a game and a half out, 6-4 since the trade, but that's not really the big thing. The big thing is the Detroit Pistons and the salary cap. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, the salary cap is set up for each team so that no one, a team with a bigger finances can attract all of the talent, and then they win every year. So the NBA come through and said, okay, look, every team can spend, and I believe that the 2018 salary cap is $101 million. So your total payroll is $101 million. That's what you get to spend. Between Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin, they combined for 53 of the $101 million. That means after their paychecks, the Detroit Pistons have $48 million to spend. Now, all of us that live in the state of Michigan knows that the owners for the pro teams in this state don't like to spend money. And I'm going to say, with the exception of Mike Ilitch. Mike Ilitch would spend whatever it takes to win. And you saw him do it with the Tigers. You saw him do it with the Red Wings. The Red Wings was able to capitalize multiple times on Stanley Cup championships because he was willing to open up his checkbook and spend the money that was needed. The Fords, no. And Garros is not going to do that. The Detroit Pistons, the Lions, they're not going to spend that type of money. They're not. See, what you have, once I go into luxury tax, you're into my profits now. So if I set it at 101 and we make 200 million, that 99 million is profit. Well, if I go into luxury and I spend over the salary cap, now the NBA taxes me on top of that. Now you're cutting into my profits. And we already know the greedy owners in the state of Michigan aren't going for that. They're just not going to have that. And that's why they don't ever win championships. A perfect example of this is, and it's not, I'm not going to say perfect. This is a tough example because Dan Gilbert, shout out Michigan State University Spartan. If you see it, hit me up. I have you on anytime. But he went into heavy luxury tax to pay for the contracts of Tristan Thompson, J.R. Smith. We already know that LeBron has a big contract. Kevin Love has a big contract. Kyrie had a big contract. I mean, Dan Gilbert spent the money, and he was rewarded with a championship. Now, since then, they're not probably going to, anytime soon, as I said a couple weeks ago, they're not going to be in contention. I mean, not contention. They will be in contention. No one's going to believe that they're a serious contender for the championship. They're the best of the East, and I don't even know if that's the case anymore. But Dan Gilbert, nevertheless, spent the money. Since they're not going to, the Detroit Pistons aren't going to spend the money and pay, or they're not going to be able to afford to pay, under the cap, to pay for free agents and other people. You're left with Luke Kennard and Langston Galloway at the 2. That's what your choices are at the 2.